Talking. Hi, everybody. We're live. Welcome to my monthly hangout with Patreon patrons and also support group for Americans living under the Trump administration. um, with some international guests here and there as they go in. We were just talking before we went on the air because we were talking about the weather, and of course here in the U.S. and places around the world as well, not just in the U.S. It's been unseasonably warm when it's supposed to be cold. Here in the northern hemisphere, we're supposed to be in the middle of winter, and we're getting a lot of, I mean, this February in my area, and I know in a lot of your other places where you folks live, you know, we're getting like 60, 70 degree days, one after the other in February, when we should be getting 30s, you know. And
it's all that hot air that Trump's been talking. It's throwing off the balance of the climate.
It's got to be it. Well, somebody shut him up. He's accelerating global warming.
He's a natural hot air source. What do you want?
He's changing the entire climate. But we said, and Lauren, you brought it up. You said, you know, you used to be able to talk about the weather, and now if you talk about the weather and you bring climate change into it, you might be hushed for you know, speaking about politics. And it's like, why is it political to be concerned about an environmental problem that threatens everybody on the planet?
And I have to bring this up too. I'm a member of Car and Driver Backfires. I am a gearhead. Most of you probably already know that. But if I were to get into their faces and say, look, you guys, anthropogenic climate change is an established fact. The only place where it is controversial is outside of the scientific community. They would lose their shit. They would completely lose it, and I'd probably lose friends. And I don't know. I don't know whether I want to walk into that particular buzzsaw, to be honest with you, because otherwise we have a great time talking cars.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, it should not be controversial. There should be certain facts that we can all agree on. And when you have a situation like anthropogenic climate change, where there is a 96, 97, 98% consensus among the world's scientists that this is a real thing, then all of us who are not scientists, like I don't see what basis what we're basing our objection on. If you're not a scientist and you don't know anything about it, and you're facing 98% of the scientific community that says this is a real thing, what are you basing your no, it's not on?
Oh my gosh! It was really, really cold the other day.
Yeah. Well.
Moron's intuition.
Steve, you know the Asimov quote, right?
Which one?
There's a cult of ignorance in the United States. There always has been. Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. I still remember seeing that quote and going, holy shit. I mean, he drilled it through its head. He was so on point.
Actually, I have a very good friend he's got a wit like a steel trap, although I'm not sure about that analogy. I don't see the comparison exactly. It hurts. It cuts your leg. Anyways, he's a very intelligent person. His mind works wonderfully. But I had to debate with him about how he had the impression that science like overturns its paradigm every few years, like they just keep discovering that they're wrong, which isn't exactly true. I mean, they keep adding to their previous theories.
Yeah, it's less a matter of overturning, and I'll tell you, somebody better name me something that has utterly been overturned in a while, because it's far less that than it is refinement.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's better instrumentation. We get, you know, better theories. We get, you know, fresh eyes on a topic. Says, oh, well, wait a minute. How about if we looked at it this way? And, you know, you don't get a revolution, you get evolution, if you'll pardon the relationship.
Yeah. Well, even something that was like a revolutionary thing, like Einsteinian physics. I mean, that was more a refinement of the old ideas. It wasn't like Einstein came up with something and everybody was like, oh my God, you know, Isaac Newton was completely wrong. It was, no, this is just a better way to look at it.
Newtonian physics still work. as long as you stay below, say, about 0.01 C.
Yeah.
There's other things that Einsteinian mechanics accounts for, that like the spiral of the orbit of Mercury.
Exactly, the precession of
Yeah,
Mercury.
it explains more stuff. It puts the universe in a bigger context. That you okay, this makes more sense, but it doesn't mean that Isaac Newton was completely wrong. Just like there have been many refinements and additions to the theory of evolution since Darwin, and it doesn't mean that Darwin was wrong. It means that Darwin started it, and as we gained more information, we created the modern theory, which is based in large part on Darwin's theories, but it is also a lot more complete than his.
Actually, come to think of it, Steve, it's just something just occurred to me. I'm sure it occurred to me before, but it occurred to me again, and I don't know why I keep becoming the advocate for Star Trek Voyager against you, but
you bastard!
I don't know why it happens, but it happens. But the episode where they discover the Voth, that race of dinosaur people who originated on Earth, it occurred to me this is a bunch of dinosaurs who are arguing against evolution for religious reasons.
Yeah. I have to say, what was that, Joe?
That episode was great. One of my favorites of that.
I have to say, I have been rewatching Voyager lately, because I'm finally going to get around at some point, hopefully in the next couple of weeks, to doing another Star Trek video, and the subject is going to be Captain Janeway, and whether or not she's actually as bad as I've always thought she was. And so I'm rewatching some Voyager to prepare for that, and it's not as terrible as I remember. I still wouldn't consider it like comparable to original series or Next Generation or Deep Space Nine, but I'm taking my time. Like I'm still only in the first season, but it's not as awful as I remember. And I think maybe part of it was I was like 15 when it started, and I was like, this isn't as good as I hoped it would be. This is the worst thing ever.
I have a question as it comes to Janeway. I think it'd be fascinating to take the Janeway character and interview her after the return to Earth and say, if you had it to do over, would you have destroyed that station that basically doomed you to the long trip back? Or, and they could have worked it differently. Could you have employed the station technology to get you back and then arranged to destroy it after the fact?
Yeah.
Of course, if you do that, you don't have a series, obviously. But the point being, initially she was thinking like a Starfleet officer, and and with the ethics and the morality of a Starfleet officer. No, you don't let this get into the hands of, I've forgotten the name of the antagonists who were there back in that day.
The Kazon.
Yeah, the Kazon, yes. Yeah. And Putty Cat, you can move, please. And but the thing is, she was not thinking in terms of as much in terms of the necessity of prioritizing the survival of her crew. And that evolved to the point where at times, I'll tell you, the last thing you wanted to be was on Janeway's bad side.
Yeah.
Because she recognized, I don't have any fallback position.
I think, go ahead.
So I was going to actually try to bring it back to climate change, but if you want to make your face
go for it. Good luck.
Well, what I was going to bring up was touching on the idea of paradigms in science. There's a very important book that was published in the 1960s called The Structure of Scientific Revolutions by philosopher Thomas S. Kuhn. Thank you very much, Wikipedia. And the important point that Kuhn was making was that scientists are also susceptible to rigid thinking, and he compared basically the difficulties when people were locked into Einstein's notion of atomic physics, which were deterministic, being confronted with quantum physics. Now, the reason that they started to develop probability theory as an answer to quantum physics rather than a deterministic, atomistic approach to it was that it was data-led. They were observing these things that weren't determined, but they were either or going, they're going to turn out one way or the other. It was a question of probability. And Einstein and the scientific community in the early 1920s really started to resist this notion. It might have been in the 1930s, but when quantum physics came up, there were a lot of deterministic people who rejected it because they were locked into a certain worldview. And that was when Einstein made his famous quote about, God not playing with dice. It's one of the reasons he was uncomfortable with quantum physics and the theories that were being developed out of it. So what Kuhn was arguing was that there is a dogmatism that can enter into even the scientific community, and it takes a lot of evidence to the weight of that evidence to finally convince people and for the paradigm to shift. But the important thing there is that it's data-led and it's observable and testable. And when we get to issues of climate change, I think the problem is that people generally don't have a good grounding in why scientific findings are credible and how to evaluate the claims of people who deny and attack the evidence for climate change versus the overwhelming evidence for humans' involvement in climate change. And so the people tend to treat these as equally opposing views. It's a false dichotomy in terms of credibility. And if you get exposed to one particular worldview and you start to adopt that, then you have a cognitive bias. Like if you're a climate change denier, you're going to be more familiar with the arguments against the scientific evidence for climate change. And people think their opinions are enough to counter if they can just recite things. So I think part of the problem is just that we don't have a good appreciation for the respect with which we should treat scientific findings and also the caution and flexibility. So that was what I wanted to throw in.
Christy, part of the problem is that, it's not just an understanding of science, scientific theories. It's an understanding of science, period. We have backslid so badly on that, it scares the life out of me. I look at the education my daughter got in high school, and she got a terrific one, but then she's also attending she was attending one of the best schools in Ohio at the time, and this is a good, it's 10 years ago. I'm getting to be an old man. But just what we're teaching now and how it's being taught is, I look at this and I look at what happened after Sputnik went up, and can we get another Sputnik, please? Can we get something to wake people up and say, hey, maybe we ought to, focus on this?
Well, I think Christy touched on it in what she said, that there's a lot of bias in play. And because one of the things I often ask myself is, if the scientific consensus on climate change is so overwhelming, why is it that so many people are still so resistant to it? And then I remember it's because it requires us to change. Mm-hmm. It requires us to do something different. If we accept that climate change is real and it's happening and it's largely our fault, and we have to change things about the way we handle ourselves on a large global scale. We have to change the way we manufacture. We have to look for new sources of energy. We have to change things about our lifestyles. There's a lot of resistance to that. Yeah. The scientific support for the things like the basic laws of physics and gravity and things like that, and even things that there are some resistance to from certain circles, like the age of the Earth and the age of the universe. Most people accept those things, but there are a lot of people that don't accept climate change, and that's because accepting how old the Earth is, or accepting how gravity works, doesn't impose any necessity on you to change.
Yeah,
but climate change does.
Yeah, the thing is, the problem is, Steve, it's not just that, and I'm not even sure that's the chief reason. The chief reason is short-sighted profit motive.
And tomatoes. Yeah. Tomatoes being fruits or vegetables. Which is it, science? Come on.
Yeah, they can't even make up their mind about that.
Or are they tomatoes, or are they love apples? Anybody remember that one?
That was also a... Oh, sorry, I don't remember that, but also there was that piece that John Oliver did about studies as they're presented by like talk shows and whatnot, and that can't have helped.
Yeah, a lot of things are presented as definitive when they're not,
and they also don't present the questions that were actually discussed in the study, which is very important, and the biases and all that.
Yeah, and that's something that I run into when I do my good news videos. I try to at least slip a line in there about how this isn't settled yet. You know what I mean? If there's a study that is just published that has some, you know, really exciting new finding, you know, I want to focus on the exciting new finding because that's why I'm talking about it. But I also want to slip in like, now this still needs a lot of work. You know, we don't know for sure that this is what it looks like. You know,
Well, I like what you were talking about earlier about leaving room for refinement. You know, nothing being cut and dry until we narrow it down, and that each step of finding new information is narrowing it down and getting it better, rather than saying, nope, we can't even question it.
Well,
yeah,
I guess.
go ahead.
Well, the problem with the guys, you know, it's the same attitude. It's the same mindset that, you know, questions climate change, that question whether or not nicotine was an addictive material. These guys are leaning on their profits. They're taking a short view of things, and they're completely disregarding the long view. And I mean, one way, the long view, you got a lot of people dying from lung cancer. The other way, with the other one, you got a lot of people dying, period, because the seas rise and the temperature rises, and it gets unlivable.
Well, and you know, there are people in this country losing their minds over the prospect of us taking in a few 10 or 100,000 refugees from Syria. And if we start having to take in climate change refugees, we're not talking about tens or hundreds of thousands. We're talking about potentially millions of people who are going to need some other place to live because where they used to live is underwater.
Yeah,
or is uninhabitable for some other reason.
And that doesn't even talk to the issue of people in the United States. I mean, how long is it going to go before Texas and Oklahoma and New Mexico and Arizona become unlivable?
Yeah, exactly. There are places in our own country.
Wait, Arizona?
And I haven't even mentioned Mexico yet.
Yeah, on Tanya's point, there's a great quote by Bertrand Russell where he says, the essence of the liberal outlook lies not in what opinions are held, but in how they are held. Instead of being held dogmatically, they are held tentatively, and with a consciousness that new evidence may at any moment lead to their abandonment.
Christy, I don't know if you've probably seen the line from that Lawrence Krauss gave, where he wishes that everybody at some time or other in their life has something they hold dearly get proved wrong. I think it's brilliant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because once you have that experience, you realize the world doesn't fall around your ears, then it might be the case that you're more open to questioning your opinions in the future. But that's really not how, you know, coming back to education, we're taught what things are. Right? So you take a test and you know what the right answer is. And this idea of the right answer can change is, again, you know, it's not part of what we're taught in science. It was amazing to me when I picked up a science textbook from the 1950s. It was a geology book when I was doing my science credits for my undergraduate and I was doing geology. And they were teaching about the contraction theory of the surface of the earth. The idea that the earth, when it was hot, was slightly bigger, and then as it cooled, it contracted. And that contraction is what caused mountains. And then that was later replaced with plate tectonics. But we don't hear about the theories that have fallen by the wayside and why they fell by the wayside. We're just taught, okay, there are plates and we move along the plates, and it seems like it's just we've always known these things. And so our education system, I know there's a lot of stuff that we need to get into people's heads by the time they leave at 18. But, you know, sometimes we are so focused on measurable outcomes like getting right answers on the test. We don't think about the quality of content that goes into the presentation of those facts.
Yeah, we talked some time ago about the history of science, and I remember you and I had a conversation about that. This is something I'll tell you, I really think it should be taught, because not only does it give us a background of where we came from in terms of how our current knowledge developed, but it at least gives us an inkling of, well, there's not a hard and well, that's interesting.
What's that? Okay.
It gives us at least an idea that there is not necessarily a specific unique path going forward. And I think that's important. To understand that we can get sidetracked, we can get on the wrong track, but if we're honest with ourselves as scientists, we can, oh, hey, I did, there was I probably brought this up once before. There was a story of a guy who had this brilliant presentation that he was going to, present to a scientific academic community. And he literally at the 11th hour discovered that he had made a fatal flaw. And he literally went up in front of the group and says, gentlemen, I am, terribly sorry to tell you this, but I have been made aware of this fatal flaw I had in my reasoning. I can't give this presentation. And he received a standing ovation.
Yeah.
One of the criticisms that exists within the academic peer-reviewed journal publication community is that it's not that sort of, when you have a popular theory and you don't find evidence for it, again, this comes back to the critique of Kuhn in the Paradigm of Scientific Revolutions. People are less likely to publish that paper than one that already confirms a theory that's been well established.
Mm-hmm.
And null findings. When you try a theory out and you get no results, that's not as sexy. So there's also a bias, again, in the scientific communities to, not resist that paradigm shifting, but maybe just natural conscious biases with, thinking that something works, and then not recognizing it when it doesn't, especially in the social sciences. My own PhD supervisor came up with something called the Essex model for British politics, which basically said that whatever the economy was would predict the government, which government would win, whether it was the incumbent or a challenging party. And it worked until it didn't. And then they had to throw it away for something else. But again, there is that kind of bias too in the scientific communities for things that you've known for a long time.
It seems like social sciences, they have a lot more blurry borders. I guess it's newer, I suppose, but then I'm just talking out of my ass there.
Well, yes. So I would say that, our scientific approach in terms of trying to adhere to the scientific method, that is still the guiding principle of quantitative social science. Mm-hmm. And now we try to get our theories in such a way that we can make testable statements. Mm-hmm. The biggest challenge for us is that, the weight of an atom hasn't changed since it was formed out of the heat of the universe, but why people do things changes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
so it's a moving target of observation.
Oh, and there was
try to be objective. I mean, we're all still humans and subject to human biases. It's completely impossible to completely remove all biases.
Well, okay, if I could say, in terms of, if I could, just sorry to step in here, and I'm just going to take over a little bit, but when it comes to doing quantitative social science, I think this is important. The point of it being quantitative and to have measurements. So we have a Likert scales of strongly agree to strongly disagree. And we talk about what to do with people who don't respond or say, I don't know. We try to get really precise measurements that are free from influences of other things. We try to control for all of the other influences. So in political science, we control for your party identification and your income and your age and your union membership and all kinds of things about you. So we can measure those influences discreetly, independent of each other, each separate piece of information.
I actually, in one of my math classes, they actually discussed one of the techniques for just sort of circumventing the
Someone needs to be muted again.
Certain
that was a weird echo.
The biases of, like, it's an embarrassing question, so they have sort of mathematical techniques of weeding out the embarrassed answer.
Yeah, social desirability things and interviewer effects, and we try to control for all of this to try to make sure our results are uncontaminated, like they do in experimental social science and social psychology. Mm-hmm. So there's that part of it, but then there's also the qualitative side of it, which is that we have to understand, one, that people that we're talking to, as citizens who are voting or not voting, have their own worldviews and biases. We come at it with our own biases, and you can't always be objectives, but what you can be is transparent. You can kind of be upfront with your perspective and then give the data and your interpretation of it, but maybe somebody else would come to that data with a slightly different perspective, like a Marxist perspective, so they want to look at it from class, and I'm coming at it from like the influence of patriarchy and gendered social norms. So we can look at the same data with our sort of emphases and understandings and have independent interpretations of it that when we bring it together give us a fuller understanding of ourselves and each other.
I think there's a further thing there, Christy, and I think this goes to something far more fundamental, and that is the willingness to admit that you're wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Because this is something that I see it a lot in Lawrence Krauss. And you know, just that very fact that he put that statement out there is having some, because he's almost certainly had theories and concepts and whatever else have you that he's busted his butt on, and you know, you hit that point where you go, oh shit. And in his case, it's a big oh shit, because he's got funding and he's got, you know, he's invested, you know, tons of time and whatever else have you in it, and he's got to reboot. And because he's honest with himself about it, he's willing to reboot, because ultimately he's not interested in feeding his egos. He's interested in learning the truth.
The other thing, too, is that the weight of the evidence will eventually crush you. So in science, it's better to own up to your errors right away so that other people can learn from them. And we can move on in the scientific community rather than trying to cover up, because, you know, whether it's plagiarism or faking your results, time eventually it'll catch up with you.
Mm-hmm.
And so there should be disincentives from that, you know.
Cold fusion, anyone?
Well, there's speaking of fusion, there is a hole that I learned about in funding for science, where there's a kind of fusion that involves hydrogen and boron. It's aneutronic, I mean, it doesn't produce neutrons, and it rather than trying to force the plasma to be stable, it relies on the way that it becomes unstable to fuel the fusion process. And they only need like a few $1 million to do a 5-year study to refine their techniques and whatnot. But they can't get that because, for one thing, apparently funders don't want to fund a lot of small projects. They want to fund a great big project.
Do a GoFundMe.
There you go. Hey, is that how Dr. Octopus did it? Spider-Man 2?
No, he had Osborn back in him.
Yeah, that's right.
And then he started robbing banks.
I need the precious tritium.
Oh, the precious tritium.
That he keeps in his safe. He keeps it in his safe in his penthouse. Here you go. Here's the rare element you need.
Mm-hmm.
No. Just go to any nuclear power plant. I think they'll have an excess for you.
Yeah.
Well, if you're in a comic book universe, if you go to the nuclear power plant, all you got to do to get superpowers is expose yourself to radiation.
Mm-hmm.
Have some water.
Yeah, exactly. You
Just be careful, it's a bit heavy.
Why is this water so heavy?
My deuterium.
Oh God.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it goes back to you know, we like to have answers to questions, and when we get a question answered, our instinct is to just stop there, to just settle on that and say, okay, we figured that out. Awesome. Now we know something, you know? And then when someone else comes along 20, 30, 50 years later and says, actually, I don't think that wasn't really the right answer. I think this is the right answer. And look, I have all this proof that shows it. You know, we're naturally slow to accept it because we're like, well, no, we figured this out.
That's why theories are never fully settled, because it's acknowledged that there's the potential for data out there that we haven't reckoned on yet. And again, there's another opportunity for refinement.
Actually, that reminds me too of one of the holes that was present. One of the holes in our net, our scientific net, I guess I could call it, was presented in John Oliver's thing about studies and the way they're presented, but also there's not money in reproducing the results, which is an important part of the scientific process. But I wonder if anyone would, if given the idea, nonprofits could be put together that give grants for reproducing results.
Not with government funds right now.
Yeah, it's the funders like to get stuff that is new, because it justifies, if you can get new publications out of things, then it justifies the funding. It shows an impact factor to the money. If you're just reproducing results that already existed, you're not actually advancing knowledge, you're confirming the theory. That's a lot less sexy, because you're basically saying what we thought was right was right.
Yeah.
I love working for the university. They gave us resources. They didn't expect any results. But
I worked in the private sector. They expect results.
Yeah, we could have a whole discussion about impact factors and how it's really damaging British education, because that's what I'm familiar with. But yeah, there's increasingly this link to outcomes. Like we shouldn't fund political science that doesn't show America to be the best country in the world, kind of thing.
Yeah, there's no way that could backfire on us. That's what happened with human space exploration. Is that we peaked really early. We landed on the moon almost 50 years ago, and now it's like, okay, what next? Are we going to Mars? Well, we're not quite ready to go to Mars yet. Oh, well, call me when we get to Mars. It's like nobody's interested in all of the work between here and Mars. It's like, well, just call a press conference when you're ready to shoot people to Mars, okay? Because we don't care about all of the actual work.
The prospect of a orbital laser shooting a probe at near the speed of light towards, well, even if we could just shoot a probe with a laser out into the Oort cloud, that would just make my spine tingle right out of my back.
I think we should all get together as a planet and fake a manned space launch to the solar system that we just discovered with the 7 planets.
Yeah.
So that 40 years from now they'll be scared shitless because they'll think we're almost there. If there are people there, of course. Oh my God, wait a minute, this is 40 light years away and they just launched it. They're almost here. Oh Jesus.
No, it'd be at least an 80-year wait, because you got round trip time, guy.
Well, we got to tell them. We got to tell them that we've developed light speed travel. We can gloss that over. We figured out how to travel at the speed of light, and then from here to there, it's only 40 years. So from here to there, it'll be 40 years.
Just like broadcast a bunch of sci-fi at them, and they'll turn out believing it like Galaxy Quest.
Yeah, exactly. The historical documents.
You don't really need a light speed engine so much as just a frictionless engine that will slowly accelerate to near light speed. And granted, it won't get you quite there in 40 years, but maybe like 42, 45.
I said 40.
40. Do I hear 30?
I said 40, 30? Nerd.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. So, okay, now I don't usually do this for our Hangouts because I like them to be very freeform and very open, but someone did actually suggest a topic for this one, and it's a good one. My Facebook friend Brad left a comment and said, you could talk about this. So this is completely a hard right turn from what we've been talking about so far. But on Friendly Atheist today, Hemant Mehta posted an article with this headline, and I'll post the article for you guys in the chat as well. The headline is Joshua Feuerstein. Have I got your attention? Joshua Feuerstein thinks his prayers will cancel out witches' spells on Donald Trump.
In other words, something that does nothing will act on something that doesn't do anything anyway and can't do anything.
Exactly. So apparently what happened was, and yesterday he reported on the story that Joshua Feuerstein is responding to, which is apparently Lana Del Rey tweeted that on February 24th, which was 2 days ago, March 26th, April 24th, and May 23rd, occultists and witches are supposed to get together and cast spells like anti-Trump spells. So Joshua Feuerstein posted this video on Facebook where he says, in part, quoted in the article, witches are gathering together around the globe to perform black magic against the president. But I've got news for you. I don't care if there's millions of witches that are gathering against Donald Trump, because their bibbity bobbity boo isn't more powerful than the name of Jesus. So
that's not even fair. That's very imaginary.
Whoa, Steve, he's right though. It isn't any more powerful. It isn't any less powerful either.
Yes, exactly. So yeah, so as I always, the first thought I always have when I hear about Christians or any religious folks other than Wiccans, I suppose, getting all up in arms about witchcraft. You've admitted that you believe in witchcraft in like a literal way. Like you don't, it's not just a spiritual prayer. Like you believe that witches are casting spells and that they have the power to do shit by casting spells. You say magic. You're telling me that you think that magic is real, and you're going to pray to Jesus to stop it. So, okay. I don't know. I mean, And also, I should also point out, because Seth Andrews made a video about this last year or the year before, about Joshua Feuerstein's fundraiser to buy himself a red camera. The video that he posted was apparently shot on his cell phone, so he hasn't got that red cam yet.
Oh dear.
Don't hold your breath.
I don't think you should. I don't think he's.
I remember being Christian and having the ability to distinguish between things that I thought were like the natural world, and then things like Santa, that at one point I believed as a child, and the Easter Bunny and the Tooth Fairy, but then came to accept that that wasn't real. But then still holding this other thing that I also believed as a child, and had attributed the same sort of magical powers as I did to Santa and the Easter Bunny and the Tooth Fairy, but that was still really real. And that started to fade. But to me, that sort of, it's not even just a what's real, what's not real division. I think I have to try to remember what it was like when I was a believer, to think about the rationalizations that underpin those different tiers of non-existence.
Do you remember trying to pick out which particular thoughts you were having were implanted by Satan? Because I remember doing that.
In a way, now that you brought it up, I mean, it is, I don't know what's more interesting to me, when religious folks seem like they believe in everything. Because, I know some Christian folks who, they not only believe in their religion, of course, they don't believe in anybody else's religion, but they believe in their religion, but they also believe like in ghosts and near-death experiences and witchcraft and magic. I don't know what's more interesting, those types of folks, or the folks that only believe in their religion and they don't believe in anything else supernatural or anything else, paranormal. And it's like, okay, so what happened? Like, there's just like a blind spot in your brain, I guess, where you're able to critically examine all these other things and say, oh, that's just ridiculous. How could anybody believe that? But then there's this one thing that you believe.
Put it in one word: indoctrination.
Yeah,
you're so acclimated to it, and you're acclimated to it at a time when you have no defense against it, being that you're a kid of X number of years old, and then you're slowly but surely introduced to a world that has reason and reasons and cause and effect and all these wonderful laws of nature and physics and everything else, and it just gets compartmentalized off to the side here. And until you actually examine it the same way you examine everything else, it's just going to stay compartmentalized.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. It's compartmentalization. But it is interesting that, because I have people in my family who are, just super Christian, like the people, the kind of folks that go to church twice a week, which still just blows my mind. Why would you go to church twice a week? God only tells you to go one day.
Maybe they really like being bored.
It's like, why blow a perfectly nice Wednesday evening, but they're super skeptical about everything else. Like if someone mentions, oh, I think I have a ghost in my house, like they'll roll their eyes right along with me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, come on, a ghost? Really? You're a grown up. You believe in ghosts? But all the Jesus stuff, they're completely on board with. And it's that, I'm sure that's what it is. It's compartmentalization. And they were raised to, believe in a universe where that was part of how it worked, I
can imagine the thoughts. Each thought represents a construct within your mind, a sort of computational construct, and each one can be independent, and they need to interlink in order to challenge each other and make a larger framework. And sometimes that just doesn't happen. Sometimes the one thought is activated independent of all your other more reasonable, larger framework.
Yeah.
On
and
that point,
sometimes they have emotions defending them, like apparatus to defend them from other ideas.
yeah, when I first started doing my channel, and I wish I had time to do this, I'm really sad I set this research aside, but I listened to about 200 people's deconversion stories. And doing so, you hear different kind of goals or little stops along the way that a lot of people go to. They don't always follow the same path, but there is this point where, as you said, there's this interconnected series of concepts that people have that put together their religious viewpoint, whatever it is. At least with the Christians Canadian and American Christians that made videos on YouTube was my sample. But they get to the point where they get a question, they get so many questions building up, or they just might have an insight where the fundamental core that keeps all of those connections together comes apart. And when you pull at that thread, I called it world collapse. They start questioning everything, and everything like a domino just starts to fall apart in front of them. So yeah, it's very much like you described.
If anybody here has seen Evidence's arc of videos where he talks about his, deconversion, he talked about super belief as being a network of belief having individual elements to it. I don't remember all the elements, but I thought that was a tremendous insight into understanding how the belief system reinforces itself by not depending on any one single element. But he had I think it was 6 or 7 that totally summed up.
That's interesting. I was just talking in the chat on the side about the performance of belief as well. I mean, it's been ages since I believed, but I went through the motions of sort of seeking anyway. I studied paganism for a year. My last stop was the Unitarians, but I didn't believe any of it. But I don't know, for something in me felt a need, even though it's not logical or rational at all, to try and, put something there.
Yeah.
If you start from a point of belief, though, people don't just go from theism into atheism. It's a process. And actually, my video is called, I think, like My Deconversion Story or something, but it's on my channel, and I put my own self in these stages and sort of walk through it as a personal example. But it's, one of the other trends is people go from conservative to increasingly liberal until eventually they're Unitarian Universalists, and then they walk away into atheism, or at least agnosticism and then to atheism. But you're right, people don't just wake up atheists. It's a process, and it's usually people who are trying to find God, who repeatedly don't find God, that this is how they end up on atheism if they've grown up a believer. There are also people who I classify as sort of almost like natural unbelievers. There are people who as kids found God very lacking in credibility and so attached no emotional connection to it. But for those of us like me who were very gullible and believed God and Santa and the Easter Bunny, put a lot of emotional attachment into it, it's much harder to disentangle yourself emotionally from those frameworks. So, yeah.
Annie, do you want to test your mic?
Ready?
Annie?
Testing 1, 2, 3.
Testing
Annie.
1, 2, 3. I can't hear you. I don't think you fixed it. Sorry.
Lauren,
Yeah.
there's somebody named Evidence.
Yeah, it's he spells it well, hell, I'll put it in the chat so you can see it.
I think isn't the last E is a 3.
Yeah. It's a pretty old video series by now.
Yeah, it's several years old, but it's excellent. It's very thoroughgoing. It's also production values are wonderful. I mean, I ran onto that really early on when I personally, when I finally took the plunge and said, "Hey, I absolutely am an atheist," and apparently I think he's actually, I mean, he was talking about, getting into production again. I don't know what happened to him, but
I'm just thinking that if he doesn't have like an intro segment in the front of the video, and then like he comes through a door and he says, "Hold on, the evidence has arrived."
well, no, yeah, he's nowhere near that dramatic, but he is. I don't know. I think of him. I don't know if any of you have ever run onto Purple Fox, who had a 6 video series. Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you what, Purple Fox came up with a one quote that I thought was just premium, and that is that religion alters your personality for the preservation of itself. Mm-hmm. That one hit me like a thunderclap. I'll tell you, I thought that was, again, brilliant.
It's probably the most pernicious meme in the original sense of the word meme.
But bang.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, it's a retrovirus.
Yeah,
pretty much.
It is.
Yeah, you're right. For me, it was Christianity to sort of non-specific theism to deism to atheism. That was like the hopscotch that I played. And honestly, for me, I can pinpoint the reason why I clung to it so stubbornly is because I don't want to die. I mean, it's fear of death. It's wanting there to be an afterlife, wanting to have, the comfort of believing that, this life is not the end. It took me until I was in my mid-20s to, to let that go and just sort of say, okay, hey man, this is the universe you were born into. You know, you just have to accept this. You know.
Yeah.
I actually developed a sci-fi plot out of my fear of oblivion, involving in the future they discover how to manipulate particles that don't obey causality. They discover a whole bunch of other standard models. They just don't obey causality, so you can affect time before it. And they like affect these particles in order to make a self-sustaining pattern outside of time. So they build God, and God will catch you when you die, etc. Out of my mind-numbing fear of oblivion.
Yeah.
The thing is, I feel like if we were immortal, we'd actually fear eternity. Because
Yeah.
now that
Yeah.
I've crossed the line to atheism, the idea of never dying, of this never coming to an end, is way more scary than the idea of my non-existence, which I've already experienced because I had that whole billions of years before I was born. That was fine. So yeah, actually, it's the thing that we are inevitably facing is the thing that we fear. I think if we, like I said, if we were immortal, it might be, oh my God, this is terrible. How are we going to fill the next billion years of our lives?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it was Mark Twain who said, I didn't exist for billions of years before I was born, and it didn't inconvenience me in the slightest.
It's a brilliant quote.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of death, Bill Paxton. You were talking about it earlier in the chat in our hangout, and yeah, I want to acknowledge the passing of Bill Paxton. He died apparently yesterday, and was not my favorite actor. I think that's safe to say, but always seemed like a nice guy, and always seemed like he was having a good time in movies. And as Lauren pointed out in the chat earlier, he definitely had his moments. He definitely has had some incredibly memorable moments or lines or characters in films over the years, and it's sad, because it's so unexpected. Apparently he died from complications due to surgery, and he was only 61. And it's just, I feel kind of bad that I wrote the guy.
He just had this new project of the Training Day.
Yeah, the Training Day series.
Yeah, I hadn't seen any of it. I was curious to see what he could bring to it, but I mean, that's in the dumper now.
It reminds me a little bit of when Patrick Swayze died, and because he had just started a new series, and then he died. Of course, he had been ill for many years. Patrick Swayze had cancer for a long time, but he was in remission, and he was feeling better, and he started this new show. And then after the first season, I think he died, and it was like, oh shit, he was still working. He was right in the middle of something. And same thing with Bill Paxton. He had sort of reinvented himself on TV a little bit. I saw someone else mention it in the chat earlier too. He had he was a villain on the first season of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and was actually pretty good. I mean, I have to say, as someone who was not a big Bill Paxton fan, he was pretty good as Coulson's sort of evil former mentor on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Hey, Steve.
Yeah, man.
Who's the best pilot you ever saw?
You're looking at him. Yeah. I think old Swaggart gave me the clap. I heard him. I saw him pissing in my relief tube. That's a little Paxton from Apollo 13 for you.
Yeah, wasn't the best pilot line though from The Right Stuff?
Yeah, that was Dennis Quaid, and Dennis Quaid's the one who said it.
Yeah.
You're looking at him.
Well, I'm confusing actors, aren't
And by the way, somebody check on Dennis Quaid. Let's not lose him too.
The bizarre death train continues.
Yeah. Hopscotch from astronaut movie to astronaut movie.
It's been a while since I've seen The Right Stuff. It just sort of replaced Bill Paxton's face where Dennis Quaid was.
Damn.
Wasn't that the movie that Walter Cronkite lost his shit about? Because it's more drama than it is historical.
The Right Stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Well, I mean, it is. It's not a docudrama. I mean, I think it gets the facts broadly correct, but yeah, there are well, there's all the stuff in there about Chuck Yeager and him being sort of a mythical figure. I mean, Chuck Yeager is almost godlike in the movie.
Yeah.
Does he have clearance to take the Starfighter up? Oh,
that was supposedly the NF-104 too. which obviously they couldn't represent properly. Either they didn't have the budget or whatever have you to hang the booster engine on that. But no, you don't take a high-performance experimental aircraft up on a whim.
Yeah. And then that was also cross-cut with the astronauts moving to Houston. And in reality,
and
those two
going to
events
the big
took place
party
like months
with-
apart.
Yeah, the big party that Johnson was putting up for him,
Yeah. So, there was
which was ludicrous.
there was some massaging of the facts, but I think as someone who is a huge fan of especially the early NASA space program, and I mean Project Mercury is still probably my favorite period of
Massaging of the facts.
yeah, it's it gets the important stuff right.
That's just an interesting way of putting it.
Well,
Yeah. As it comes to that, what I really enjoy, and which I every couple of years I go back to it, is From the Earth to the Moon, because Hanks did such a brilliant job on that.
It's such a great series. I'm completely with you on that. That's such a great series.
Who was it that decked a? Somebody said that the moon landing there was a hoax. And
Buzz Aldrin.
Buzz Aldrin.
Yep,
yes. Yep. The only surviving Apollo 11 crew member now, because Armstrong and Collins have both died. Yeah. Buzz is still going strong. I bet he would punch Bart Sibrel out again if he saw him. So all the people who were pissed at me over the last few weeks for saying that I didn't care if somebody punched a Nazi. I didn't care. Like 5 years ago, I didn't care if somebody punched a moon landing hoaxer either. Mm-hmm. So get with the program.
Hey, okay? Can we turn Buzz Aldrin loose on Steve Bannon?
Also, can I just point out this irony of what they're really offended at is that they are upset about how we feel about something.
Yeah.
This is the thing is, we both said we don't support political violence. I said that specifically several times. No, don't do it. If the guy gets arrested who did it, then he should get arrested. He broke the law.
It's illegal,
do I have to feel bad? No. And then, these people go, you're not feeling bad. I'm outraged about your feelings.
Yeah. It's like, okay, well, you know what? If you don't feel bad about police brutality, then I don't feel bad about Nazis being punched. How about that?
Thank you.
Yes. Yes.
How about that? How about we'll both not feel bad for the shit we don't feel bad about? And
there's a poster for the next March.
Yeah, and personally, I don't know. I would have a much easier time sleeping at night my way than your way. I mean, I'm totally cool with Nazis being punched. I'm not going to recommend it, but if I open the newspaper and the headline is Nazi got punched, I'm going to say, good. What a great way to start the day.
Somebody that was
Dog bites Nazi.
America do.
Dog bites Nazi. But if I open the paper, you open the paper, it's like, oh, some more racist police brutality. Oh, that's terrible. We should really get around to fixing that at some point. I do care about that. But some asshole white supremacist getting his teeth knocked out?
Exactly. False equivalency.
Fuck do I care?
What about when the Pope said that if you insult his mother, whoops.
Yeah, but I guess it's one of those things where like people can't decide whether they like the Pope or not. Do you?
Yeah, I'm one of those people.
Yeah, me too. Me too. It's like because he'll say something like the thing he said the other day, like it's better to be an atheist than to be a hypocritical Christian. It's like, wow, so he's actually, he seems like he's calling on people to have integrity and to
it's a trap, Steve.
Exactly. That's what it feels like. Because then he's like, 2 weeks later he'll be like, oh, trans people, they're all mentally ill. Like, oh, you fuck. Like
women will never be ordained.
Women will never be ordained. Yeah.
In the Catholic Church, maybe
Pope
not.
Frank. Come on, Pope Frank.
I'll tell you, budging him off. This is a point I've made multiple times. I mean, equality of women is relatively speaking a new concept. I mean, it's only really come seriously to the fore in the last 100 or so years, and it's interesting that it's really gained a lot of traction with one very notable exception, and that may be found at Vatican City.
Honestly, I would give up women's ordination if they would just preach condoms.
Yeah, that could be a compromise position.
Yeah.
And the thing is, that shouldn't even be a compromise position. That should be a position that they need to acknowledge that they fucked up on big time.
Yeah, I mean, because if you think about it, especially in areas of the developing world where the Catholic Church has a huge amount of influence, and they're spending a lot of time, you know, converting people and doing missionary work to bring people into the church. And, you know, you're talking about areas of Africa where there are still just these heartbreakingly high levels of AIDS infection, HIV infection. And it's like, and you're indoctrinating these folks into a church that tells them that using condoms is a sin. I don't know how I don't know how you can look at yourself in the mirror and say, I'm going to go into one of the most, you know, heavily populated, high rate HIV infection areas in the world and tell them that they can go to hell for using condoms.
You know, it begs the question, who can get in the Pope's face?
Liam Neeson. I mean,
I have a certain skill set.
Yeah.
I wish I had seen Young Pope, then I could actually have a good answer to that.
I really want to see Young Pope. That
I've
looks
seen
so
enough
good.
of it to tell you that it is quirky as all fuck.
That's what I hear. That's what the
It
reviews.
is. I mean, Jude Law is almost certainly having the time of his life screwing around with this mess. But yeah, I'm. My problem is I'm not certain exactly where he's going with it. It is very bizarre.
I want to check it out because I've read some reviews of it and it sounds very interesting.
Christopher Walken could get in the Pope's face.
You've got to let the people use the condoms. my shitty Walken impersonation. Thank you for laughing. I appreciate it.
More cowbell.
How about Travis Bickle?
More condoms and more cowbell.
Herzog.
I'm a trained seal now. You must let the people use the condoms. That's more of a Schwarzenegger. My Schwarzenegger and my Herzog kind of blend together.
I'm actually going to take a class for directing with my fellow comedians because we want to do videos. We had a club owner buy us this series of classes by Werner Herzog.
Oh yeah, the masterclass thing.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I haven't taken it, but I've seen the previews for it. It looks awesome.
Yeah, looks awesome.
Yeah.
Can't wait.
Yeah, Werner Herzog is like he's one of my favorite people generally, and certainly a brilliant filmmaker. And you know, I always think of when Herzog, he did this remake of The Bad Lieutenant, starring Nicolas Cage.
Oh,
And it is just bonkers. It's just the most bonkers movie you've ever seen. And for anyone who hasn't seen it, I won't spoil the ending, but it's the ending is so out there that you think that it's going to end up being like a dream sequence, but it's not. Like, it's the actual ending of the movie. And it was one of those moments where it's like, God damn it, I love Werner Herzog. Like, he's like, no, this is the actual ending of the film.
But is that what Hans Krager is based off of?
That's what his voice is based off of. Yeah, his. But again, it depending on how easily I can get into the voice. Sometimes Hans veers more into Schwarzenegger than Herzog, but I try to keep him more of a Herzog mode. And his nihilism is sort of a parody of Herzog.
I love his nihilism so much.
Because Herzog has that amazing moment in his narration of Grizzly Man where he's like, Timothy Treadwell saw nature as an opportunity for communion and an understanding, but I see nature as a zone of murder and hopelessness, or something like that. Oh my God. The universe is a place of murder that is completely indifferent to our suffering. It's like, wow, that's that man is an artist.
Yeah, that's kind of like the Louis C.K. line that we're the only species that doesn't die from having our faces eaten off.
Yes, exactly.
We got out of the food chain. That was the most amazing thing. You know, we don't appreciate to the extent to which we got out of the food chain.
Yeah. He also has that bit where he's imagining God coming back to Earth after being away for a while and not understanding anything that's going on.
What did you do?
Where's everybody going? Oh, they're going to their jobs. What the fuck is a job? You know, it's a job. You
Bears
work.
are brown. Did you shit all over all of the polar bears?
I left
You know,
the food on the ground. Just fucking pick it up.
Exactly. Why do you need money to buy food? Why are you buying food? I left food on the ground.
Just eat the shit off the floor.
Just pick it up.
It's ground beef. It's beef we found on the ground.
I get it.
Speaking of food found on the ground, my cat knocked out a box of donuts off of the table and ate one this morning.
Nice.
You don't want these, do you? They're on the floor.
Is a troublemaker.
5-second rule.
Yeah, pick it up.
Cats do not recognize the 5-second rule. They recognize Snoopy's rule, which is anything that falls on the floor is legally mine.
Exactly.
It's after 5 seconds, it's
the
cat.
rule of cat, which is that the cat determines what is right and wrong because the cat is the perfect being.
Yeah.
Mm.
I know sometimes at night when we're falling asleep, I can hear my cat jump up on the stove,
Oh no!
like sniff around for food, like remnants that may have like fallen out of the frying pan or something that we didn't clean up. And the other night she was up there. I could hear her like rattling around for like a really long time. I was like, oh shit, she's really going to town. And then she came into bed, and I was like, are you okay? Yeah. Did you get enough to eat? Like, do I not feed you enough?
Oh, if you
What
think
we eat tastes so much better, though.
Yeah, exactly. Licking her chops, you know.
Yeah.
Oh.
My little one, Ziggy, has taken to coming onto the bed somewhere between 5 and 6 in the morning and coming up to me and going, ow, 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 and just continuing to do that until I get up and I feed the putty cats.
That's
Oh, my cats were way more tactical. They would purr and rub my face with their face and love me. And like, oh, wake up, wake up, wake up. And then they would like jump off the bed and stare. And then I would follow them to the food bowl.
Yeah,
That's
well,
what my cat does.
Ziggy isn't that diplomatic.
Wake up.
Audie does both. Audie will sit on my chest and purr at me, and if that doesn't work, she'll meow at me, and then she'll give me the very very light sort of taps on the cheek, like hey,
Oh, the
hey,
poop, huh?
hey. You know. So I've gotten into the habit of not even looking at the clock when I get up. I don't even want to know what time it is.
My cat just has sort of a if I don't feed her, if I don't keep her bowl full, then she will gorge herself and vomit somewhere.
Oh no!
Aw.
She's like a horse.
Mhm.
You got to take that food away from her.
Steve, on a scale of 1 to
Yes.
10, how safe is it for the unclawedness of your hand to touch Audie's belly?
It's usually pretty safe, but she can change her mind on a whim. She's really cool about being handled, but it's like, you know, when she decides she's had enough, you don't really get a warning. It's just like, get off me. You know?
My cat has
I keep
taken
seeing
to.
her in your videos, and I'm just like, I want to give that cat a belly rub. I want
I know.
to snuggle her.
She's pretty cool about being pet and snuggled, but you know, like I say, when she decides she's had enough, it's like, all right, put me down, leave me alone, get away from me. This is over.
Have I introduced you to Rosie?
Oh, adorable black cat. Oh my gosh.
Tiny.
Well, as long as
I woke her up.
hang on.
You can already see my cat. She's my image right now.
Aw.
Oh, there's another
Speaking
kitty.
of whom,
Aw.
Aw.
this is Ziggy, the guilty party.
Adorable.
We've seen your tail.
Now,
Yeah.
now I'm going to have to get. Now I'm going to have to get another. Now I'm going to have to get another cat and name her Evidence. Hold on, Rosie. The evidence has come.
Yeah, right.
Hangout has
Call
become
back,
very
call
internet.
back to the earlier.
Turn on your
There's a-
mic so that you can get the center stage.
What a cute kitty. See, and now, of course, mine is out of the room, so I can't join in the kitty show off.
And mine's my image, so I guess you can all see her.
I can
She's
tell you where
adorable.
she is. She's on the couch in my spot. That's where she is.
Are you
And the one I showed you is one of 5.
So, Steve, in your
Yeah.
house, who's Audie's main human? Is it you or your wife?
It depends. I think she prefers Ashley to me. If only one of us were, if the house was on fire and Audie could only come in to save one of us, she would probably save my wife. But it depends. I mean, she's she's close to both of us. I say that she prefers my wife because Ashley, she always does what Ashley tells her. Like when Ashley calls for her, she comes right away, and will usually meow when she arrives. Like, yes, what did you want?
Like my stepmom's cat.
Yeah.
She calls him over. Well, no matter what he's doing, he will come over. He is her puppy cat.
Yeah, and with me, like if she's in the room and I'll call her name to get her attention, sometimes she won't even look at me. She'll look at Ashley. Like when I'm the one talking to her, I'm like, "You motherfucker, over here, me." But
I must ask the real ruler of this house for
what would you? May I respond to what the human says?
Yes, Ashley. What does your boy want?
Yes. What does your husband want?
The primate is making noise again. I'm going to look at the one that's paying. I'm going to try to stare at the one that's being quiet.
And I'm like, I always say, like, I'm the one who feeds her. I feed her. I refill her water.
Yeah, you're the slave. You're the slave.
She views me as help. Yeah, she views me as help. She knows who's in charge. But no, she's really close with both of us. Like it depends, and actually, it's very cat-like. Like when she does decide of her own volition to come to me instead of to Ashley, it's like it means more because she doesn't bestow that every day. She's like, I guess I'll throw you a bone here.
Yeah, but then she'll go cuddle up to the table leg and be like, "Oh, I love you, I love you."
Exactly.
I love you.
Or she really loves since I got my new camera and I have a new camera bag. She loves my new camera bag. She's always like scenting it and laying down next to it. Yeah.
And leaving all sorts of cat hair that can get into the lens.
Right, exactly. I always keep it closed just because yeah.
Right, that was my mom and my half sister. I'm actually at my mom's house, which is slightly annoying because I get less privacy.
Hi, Annie. You've magically switched from one camera to the other.
Yeah, because mine's fucking broken.
Oh.
No.
Lauren, I just want to tell you it's Carolyn. From Atheist Nexus.
Hey, Carolyn. Good to see you.
Hey, Lauren.
It's great.
Right, Heather, as you probably know, has a lot more to say than I do, so I'm going to let her have my computer.
Oh, well, we're almost done. But if you have something you've just been dying to say.
One thing I'd sort of like to
speak in
throw
one
out.
unbroken sentence.
I just want to share something that happened yesterday. We went to a Cleveland Orchestra concert last night that was kind of neat. But one of the things they've been getting back into, which I think is wonderful, for the longest time, nobody was doing encores. And I swear, I actually wrote to a contact I have at the Musical Arts Association, and they actually came back to me with an answer. And since that time, they've been doing more encores. And if any of you have ever heard the Debussy piece, The Engulfed Cathedral, is what a gentleman who did a piano concerto before intermission, he used that as his encore. You owe it to yourself to hear this piece. It is one of the most mystical, beautiful, just incredibly dynamic, and yet having that quality of mysticism and mystery that I've ever heard. And on top of everything else, he absolutely owned it.
Wow. I don't think I've ever heard it. I'll have to check it out.
How do we find this?
The work is Debussy. The title is The Engulfed Cathedral. And if you want, WCLV rebroadcasts these concerts. Usually it's like 2 or 3 weeks afterward. And if you can catch it live, you might be able to hear that performance, because I would hope they would leave that as a part of that. They usually broadcast them 2 or 3 Sundays after. And I'll tell you that I just thought his performance was breathtaking.
Cool.
I also recommend.
Very, trust me.
I also recommend Etudes by Ligeti.
Well, there you go. There's your homework.
Yeah, and it wouldn't surprise me at all. You go to YouTube and just put that in Debussy and Gulf Cathedral. I'm sure you get half 100 hits at least.
Yeah, I'm going to look for that. I've never heard that piece before.
And it's interesting because the first time I heard it was I'm trying to think of the guy who did it on a Moog synthesizer, and I can't think of his name, but he did this collection of Debussy pieces, mostly for solo piano. Again, I can't think of it, but it was a record that was cut back in the 70s and was very, very modern because he used all these electronic effects and everything. And I'd never heard the actual piano version of it up until very recently when I got a collection of, Debussy pieces for solo piano. And the synthesizer version is wild, but properly done. The piano version is just mesmerizing.
Lauren, you don't mean Walter Carlos, do you?
No, it was not Walter / Wendy Carlos. Oh, drat. It's going to drive me up a wall. I'm going to have to go down, check, because I have it on CD. I can't. I'm going to look it up. Hang on.
Don't you hate that? I'm the same way. I have to look stuff up. Like, I'm later this afternoon. I'm recording a podcast with
Tomita. That's him.
Yeah,
Sal Tomita.
Later this afternoon. I'm recording a podcast with Jason, and he'll often say like, "What was that movie?" And I always have to look it up. Like sometimes I look it up in the middle of the recording because I can't.
Oh, it's fantastic! Having smartphone, being able to do that in the wild.
I still have to develop some material about it's like contrary to the whole stand-up comedy blowback against technology.
No, it's just going open.
The theme, like everybody complaining about everybody looking at their phones.
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
So
Don't have a computer.
Because it can't be that bad because everybody does it, right?
I just want to speak up. The Bon Air has been listening to this one song on loop for like 3 days.
Oh yeah, the long version of the BoJack Horseman theme. Lauren, did you get onto Tomita because of what was the guy's name? The Stargazer. His tagline was "Keep looking up." PBS used to sign off with it.
I got onto the Tomita Debussy pieces. I should mention the album name is "Snowflakes Are Dancing," which is one of the movements from the Children's Corner. But I literally got onto that because our local rock station back in the 70s picked it up and started playing cuts from it. This was WMMS back in the days when it truly was the buzzard. And they would play anything. I remember they had a skein of things, and out of nowhere they pulled up Jupiter from Holt's The Planets, and just out of nowhere because they felt like doing it. It was great. And they also premiered Snowflakes Are Dancing, and they did all these cuts from it, and that's what got me onto that. That's what got me onto them.
Well, that's why I love the internet. The local PBS station used to sign off with a little 5 or 10 minute segment called The Star Hustler, and that was his theme music. And it wasn't until the dawn of the internet that I was able to find out what that piece of music was. So
and actually, Lauren, if you made some of your mannerisms a little more pronounced, you would remind me much more of that guy.
I don't know how many mannerisms you can see. I mean, I'm not that the frame isn't that open, but
I meant the verbal mannerisms. You have a hint of mannerisms in your a hint of verbal mannerisms that are reminiscent of
okay, that I'll absolutely acknowledge.
You need to do a better job of being that other person.
Well, maybe out of talking a monotone, and you just sort of go on like this and not even moving and so on and so forth.
Exactly. Stop modulating your voice so much. Just talk in one tone all the time. Oh boy. Well, hey, we did 15 extra minutes this month, folks.
Yay.
I am going to sign off because I have to do other things. But of course, off the air, you guys can hang out and talk to each other forever for all I care. I don't.
Well, I can't because in let's see here, an hour and 45 minutes, I get to see Wait Until Dark at the Hangout.
There you go.
And no, not the movie. It's actual stage production.
Cool.
Nice.
That's really
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it.
cool. Well, we all have our plans.
Indeed.
Everybody has shit to do. So anyway, thanks everybody as always for watching. This is something.
It's super early here in California. I'm going back to bed.
Yeah,
see,
bye.
we're from all over the world. We can do whatever we want.
Oh my God, I wish I could go back to bed.
Yeah, I wish I could
Carolyn,
just-
great to see you.
Yeah, I missed
Yes.
you at the Reason Rally, Lauren. But
It was
nice
good to
meet
see
you.
the Bon Air girls.
Mm.
In the okay, so this is something I do every month for my Patreon patrons. Everybody can watch, but if you want to join in the fun, you can join my Patreon campaign. For information on that, you can go to patreon.com/SteveShives. Thanks as always to everyone who was here with me, and for everyone who watched, and for everyone who is a supporter of the Patreon campaign, wherever you may be, whether you were here or not. It's a lot of fun as always. Thanks everybody, and we'll do this again next month.
Join us. We're assimilated. Resistance is futile.
Gooble gobble, one of us.